Hi everyone, we're now at episode 4 of the White Van Podcast. It's been a whole month. So today's cast looks a little different because we have an all-girls episode this time. And before we get started, shout out to John for hosting the stream and editing the episodes. Okay, let's do introductions. We can start with Laura.
Hi everyone, so my name is Laura. I'm currently about to start my second year in computer science. It's been a really cool journey, and thank you for everyone that for giving me the opportunity to be here today.
And I'm Florence. I graduated from UTM 2 years ago with a degree in computer science and professional writing and communications. And thank you for having me.
Hi, I'm Sadia. I am a professor in the CS department at UTM. I've been working here for 5 years. I also graduated from here, so I was also an undergrad student at UTM a few years ago. Thank you for having me.
And I'm Sadia. I'm a fourth-year computer science student now. I'm currently on PUI at Oracle, and I've been a TA for a couple of courses at UTM.
Cool, so we have some awesome people here today. And thank you, Sadia, for joining us. And of course, for Florence and Laura and Naz as well. So as always, in every episode, there is a carryover question that last week's guests wanted to ask you all. Last week, we had Professor Ilir join us, and the topic was internship advice. So the question he has for Sadia is, what do you hate about CSE 207? And the question for the students and alumni is, what do you hate about CSE 207 or CSE 108? So basically the same question.
So I would say, in my case, CSE 108, I'll be taking CSE 207 in the fall. But for CSE 108, I think that the videos, I like them, but at the same time, they're a little monotonous. So, I wanted more computer science, and I got computer science. So it was different, but yeah, that's what I would say I don't like.
I don't know, because I think 108 and 207 were my favorite CS courses, so I'm a fan. I remember 148, the worst part was linked lists. Back then, everyone failed the midterm because no one understood linked lists. And then Dan Zingaro had everyone prepare the linked list so well for the exam, and then he didn't put it on the exam. But now we're all super linked list experts.
Okay, so what do I hate about 207? That's funny because I'm teaching 3 sections of 207 in the upcoming year. So 207 has been on my mind a lot these days. And it's a great course. I hope you like it, Laura. I hope so. But what do I not like about it? Is it from a professor's perspective or a student perspective?
Did you take 207 as a student too?
Yeah, I did. I had it with Andrew Peterson.
Really? That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I think Professor Ilir meant as a professor.
Okay. As a professor, I think what I do not like about 207 is how difficult it is for students to understand Git, using version control, and the number of students that would line up outside the office just with very simple kind of fixes, you forgot to push, that's why it didn't show up in the remote server, things like that. I think Git was just a big headache for 207.
For me, the one thing that I hated about 207 when I took it was that style, right, was introduced to us for the first time in 207. So it was kind of hard for us to think about style that much at that point. At that point, I wish it was kind of introduced a little earlier, like in 148, more introduction towards cleaning up code and modularity so that, it didn't suddenly pop up in 207. And the other thing was when I took 207, there was sort of a lack of communication, the expectations, right? Because I guess for style, you can't really communicate that much. This is how you're going to be marked. It's kind of like you're marking essays. You can't exactly say this is what you expect in the essay. It depends more on your creativity. So that was one element in 207 that was different from the rest of my CS courses. It's not like, if I test my code and it passes all these test cases, I'll get the marks. It's more about, are they going to like the style I use?
Yeah, it's almost similar to a writing course that way. I did 207 at St. George, so it was probably quite different. And by the way, at the end of this episode, I'll be asking you all to come up with the same question for next week's guests, so you can look ahead to that. All right, so today we have another two-part episode. Part 1 is an important topic about women in CS, and then part 2 is about productivity and organization tips, because we have a lot of organized and productive people here today. The first question that I have for you all about women in CS is, why do you think there are fewer women in CS? Like, relatively.
I think there's less women in CS because we kind of just tell women, like our society kind of just tells women, like, oh, take care more of people. I've been reading a lot about masculinity and feminine, like the feminine and masculine energies, and this is more like a spectrum. But in our society, we like things very like it's either this or this, right? Can we have like? I wish we had more of like an or inclusive in our society, but and unfortunately, I think that happens in high school as well. Like a lot, I personally never thought I could be an engineer like that. It just never made sense to me. But then I got into computer science because at the time in high school I played soccer and I really liked soccer. It was like eat, sleep, soccer, everything soccer. And I got into coding because with robotics I was also learning about like app development, and I wanted to develop an app for women in sports. And then it opened the possibility that, oh my gosh, computer science can help me solve so many problems, right? And I feel like if we showed women that like we can solve problems in computer science, you would have so many women here, right? And I think that's one of the main things. We sometimes structure it so much to like a box when it's not really that.
I think Laura makes a really good point about like the perception of what a computer science degree is. I think a lot of people equate CS to programming, but it's much larger than that. It is really more about logic, more about problem solving and thinking. And then so like traditionally, like the kind of interests that you have, like if you are not interested in programming or things that you would associate to programming, like video games, then you would not think that you would want to do this. But instead, if we start to think about like CS in a different way and start representing it in a different way, then more people might start combining it with different degrees and trying to use the skills from it in a wider range of things. Like I know myself, I had the writing, and Nivi is doing it with another program as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important to realize how like perception, like you guys mentioned, perception, representation have a lot to do with it. And some people like to argue like it's a biological thing, like women just aren't that techie or whatever. And if you take a look at historical and cultural factors, that it becomes really obvious that that's probably not the case. Especially because we all know like Ada Lovelace was the first women programmer, and there are lots of other female pioneers in computer science that just kind of get overlooked. And if I saw this graph before where it was just like charting how the number of women who go into studying different majors in university, and then it charted it for like computer science, medicine, law, and physics, things like that. And for all of them, it was rising. For computer science, it was rising up until the 1980s, and after that, there was just a huge kind of drop. So clearly something happened, and a lot of researchers, because I read a lot about these things, and there's this book called Unlocking the Clubhouse by Margolis and Fisher, which talks about how this whole social narrative got constructed in the 80s when the home computer started coming out, and a lot of the Apple ads, if you take a look at them, have boys using computers, and it just got marketed heavily as this toy made for boys, or gaming machine made for boys. And that sort of started alienating women. And it's funny because it's just a marketing thing, but it has such a huge effect because girls wouldn't see other girls using computers. And then parents wouldn't see it. And I heard these stories about people who grew up with so not our age because computers are everywhere these days, but slightly older people who had girls in the family who were really interested in computers, but they couldn't use it as often because the parents put the computer in their brother's room. So it was just this physical barrier to not having access to technology just from that young age. So it's really important for us to kind of combat these kind of weird perceptions that somehow still stick with us up to this day.
completely. I really liked that you brought that up. That was really interesting, and I want to look into that because I didn't know that there was a rise and that there was a drop in the 80s. That's really cool. And what I was thinking of is like something that Laura mentioned as well, and then Sadia did as well with the toy narrative. I was reading this paper on spatial skills. You know, boys and girls, they're kind of brought up a little differently. This is changing now, but you know, earlier if you would give a boy a gift, you would give something like, you know, blocks to construct bridges or buildings, Beyblades, cars, which kind of encourage more playing with objects and spatial skills. Whereas with girls, you would give tea sets and dolls, which is still kind of more, you know, thinking of social skills. And then we had a ton of research which suggested that, oh, girls are just better at being social and boys like playing with objects more. So I think that partly might have to do with how we're brought up in the first place. So, you know, if we could bring girls and boys up in a more gender neutral manner, maybe we'd be able to see if, you know, it's just a natural thing or if it's actually being influenced by the upbringing.
I wanted to add one more thing that I just thought of. In terms of like the unlocking the clubhouse thing, like the boys club idea, there's also a lot of like, well, I thankfully haven't personally experienced it, but I've heard of people who did, the sexist kind of culture. And just a few years ago, I think it was in 2017, there was a person who worked at Google who got fired for sending a memo out to his colleagues about how he believed that women were just biologically less capable of computer science. Like that's why there are so little women hired in Google. And he got fired for it, but that doesn't stop the fact that only 20% or something like that of Google employees working in CS are women. And because of that, there are all these young boys and teenagers who have this sort of sexism toward women, and they don't include them. And I remember my little sister told me the story about how when she was a kid, she used to really like computers. Like she took pride in being more tech savvy than like her classmates in elementary school. But when she went to high school, she dropped by a computer science class just to see what it was like. But she wasn't enrolled in it. She had friends in it, and she just dropped by. And she just heard these boys joking around about gangbang. Like, it was just such a weird kind of environment. It was completely sexist. She felt like she had no place in that conversation circle, and it just turned her off for it. And I also have this friend who is just gaming culture. It kind of has that as well. It goes into it, where she played a video game online a lot, and she was really good at it. But she literally got ostracized for being a woman who was more skilled at that game than a bunch of like male video game players in that community. So much so that she just dropped out of that community because she couldn't deal with all the kind of negativity in that environment. So I think that's really important to like, fight against stuff like that.
Thank you for mentioning
culture-
that, Sadia. For sure.
Culture plays a big role, and I thought it was interesting what Florence mentioned, that maybe people aren't sure what exactly CS is, that it's more than just, you know, sitting at a computer and programming all day. There's a logic aspect to it too, and it could be interesting to more people than the media makes it seem. That leads into our next question. So all of us here are different ages, and we've all kind of experienced different phases of the CS boom in the past few years. So what have your experiences been like as a woman in CS? If you're comfortable with sharing.
Sure. So I would say, as I kind of mentioned earlier, previously, I started off without like, I actually wanted to go into medicine. And because I started working on this app, and it was a really cool, it was something that I felt very passionate about. And when you feel really passionate about something, things happen, people come to you, the universe just does its thing. And I do have to say though that at first I did struggle a bit, in the sense that when I first joined the first robotics class ever, this was outside of school. I just wanted to take a course to try something different. And I remember coming into the room. They were a little bit younger, right? And I remember asking for one. Like, I saw this guy just like walking. And I asked him, where can I find the robotics course? He's like, oh, the one for the boys. And I was like, sure. But I mean, and I know that he didn't mean it as something rude. I can assure you that he didn't mean it as. I think it was just so like unconsciously because the entire class was filled with boys and I was the only girl there, right? So I definitely did feel the pressure of at the time I wanted to make sure that I knew that we're sisters. I needed to make sure that I knew what where the LED had to be placed. I felt those pressures because I wanted to be better. Like I wanted to like do well in this course. Like, you know, I deep down it was like I'm representing something more than me and not just that. Like when that first LED like turned on, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I want more of this, right? So it was that, and then getting into my first like in high school, my first computer science course because I like robotics. I was like, okay, maybe I should take computer science in high school. And when I did, I was one of three other like sorry two other girls, and so it was like as Sadia kind of mentioned with your sister, right? Like there were conversations that I heard that I didn't want to hear, and I just rather like focus on my things, right? Then in grade 12, the other two girls dropped, and I was the only one there. So it was so weird because even the teacher would try to like talk to me and like have small talk, and I was like in my mind, I was like, "Sir, look, I don't want to have small talk. Just like you know, you don't have to be extra nice to me. Just treat me like another one." Right? And it was weird too because even we had a video game project and we couldn't figure out the solution, and I was like part of me was a little frustrated and I kind of coded the game in like a weekend and I was like, here. Right? But it was those things where like sometimes I didn't feel like I belonged with the grade 12 class of computer science, right? It was because the guys were maybe talking about their girlfriends, their girls, and I was like, I can't really be in those conversations, right?
I guess for me, like after high school, like when I entered university, like it was a very small program at the time, like maybe 60 people, and there weren't that many females. So I didn't really end up having any female friends, any female role models. Actually, Sadia was my TA, so I guess technically Sadia. But but just no one that I was actually close with that was female, like all day, every day, like even nowadays, like my friends are mostly male. And after I graduate, I found myself like going on Bumble, like Bumble BFF, and looking for female friends because I didn't actually have any when I was in school. And so I think like I didn't like I miss out because like I do value my friends and I like who my friends are, but I do feel like there were some like elements of like support and stuff that wasn't available to me because no one was, I guess, relating because there's always like kind of like I wouldn't call them like microaggressions, but just like small things that people say or do that is obviously because you're female, but no one ever directly say it. Yeah.
I think for me, in university, I think I had a similar experience with Florence because I guess we were in undergrad around the same time. Like there was a bit of overlap, but I was lucky that I did not really directly get affected by the gender bias at an early age. Like I had female role models in high school. My tech teacher who really encouraged my abilities was female. I had a best friend who took CS with me up until grade 11, and she was a girl, so I didn't feel that sense of being alienated because of my gender at like that young age where that sort of thing is really important. And my parents, my dad, they were always supportive of me as well, and encouraged my and they encouraged my interest in technology. So that was fun. But I only really noticed how significant the gender gap was. And after I got into grade 12, I was the only girl in the class with 5 other guys. And then in university, all of the CS profs I had were straight white men. Well, mostly white because Andrew Peterson's half Asian, but he was one of my profs. But I think because of my early experiences being so positive and welcoming, this didn't affect me as much as it otherwise would have. And all these men were super nice and supportive as well. So they like praised me all the time. So like I was really lucky to have that positive environment for sure.
Yeah, so for me, I had a similar experience as well. In grade 11 and grade 12, there were just 2 girls in a CS class. I didn't feel completely alienated because of that, because at least we had each other and we were doing things. But definitely I did start seeing, what kind of environment I was going to be in. For instance, I started hearing the kind of talks that I had to get used to. because I'd grown up not having that many guys in my friend group, so that was completely different for me. Seeing people playing video games, and I couldn't really blend in well because I don't play a lot of video games. And when I came to university, that same thing happened. In first year, at least, I didn't have a lot of female friends. As people kept coming though from other years, I started making more female friends and trying to encourage them so that they didn't feel left out. But I've also started, I think, I've gained the ability to blend with male friends more. And like Sadia said, the profs that I had, even though they were like all my profs in CS almost, except for Lisa, were male. But they were all super encouraging. So that really helped, and I didn't really feel totally left out.
Right. Nas actually started a Discord called White Van Girls, which is an all-female Discord. So I'm part of that, and if you'd like to join, just talk to Nas, I guess. Laura mentioned something about something that sounds similar to imposter syndrome, and that was one of the questions that I wanted to ask you next, which is, did you experience imposter syndrome at some point? And if you did, how did you handle it? If you could give advice for others who are experiencing imposter syndrome, what would it be?
So I'd say that I felt it a lot in first year, especially it's a lot of the thought of post, and sometimes honestly, look, like I'm Colombian, I'm a Latina, I never thought I would be here, right? So you're not like being a minority in itself. I'll be honest, the first few weeks or so, I was like, what am I doing? Like, I really like computer science and I just want to get to code, but at the same time, sometimes I felt like, do I like really belong here? And on top of that, there was I also had trouble kind of finding my way, because sometimes rather than maybe having people that would ask me, how are you doing? It was more like, hey, so what did you get on that test? It's like, right? So with that, I began trying to find the right people, and that's when I found some really awesome first years. And I also found some really awesome upper years, including us. She was actually my TA, so thank you for being my TA. But I think it was just having that support. A lot of the fourth year guys, oh my god, they're like my big bros. Like they always have my back. Like, and it's good. I feel very grateful that I had those people that, it was late night and I had no idea how to do something, and they were like, it's okay, you got this, you can figure it out, we can do this, and having that support really is important. And it really taught me that, whatever happens, happens. But I think finding the right people and doing what feels right to you is best. Sometimes, especially in first year, I think that we feel like we need to be with people or accommodate ourselves or change who we are, to blend in, to have people out of convenience. But sometimes it's okay to go on the lone wolves, maybe path for like a little bit till you find the right crowd, because being yourself, especially in computer science, I think it's so important.
Always had kind of the internal struggle of like being a CS student, but also being in writing and communications. I always felt like if I did more writing or more communications, I was kind of like letting down that CS side of me. Like I should like, I'm in this program, so I should be a programmer, I should be a developer, I should be doing like software or whatever. And then when I graduated, I started off in a job that was kind of like full stack development, a bit of like machine learning, AI, and I just really didn't enjoy it. And I was thinking like, why is this happening, right? Like, am I not meant to be doing this? Am I not qualified to be doing this? Like, why do I feel this way? So then I switched over to a job in marketing, and I felt the same way. I was like, these are my two majors. Why are neither of them making me happy? Why am I not passionate about either of these things? And eventually I landed on the position that I have now, which is a combination of both. So it's a marketing operations. So it is the technical side of marketing. And then now I found like a good balance, and like I had those skills all along, but I just didn't fit into the bubble of either being super technical or being super communication based. And one of the ways that I kind of navigated through that is by asking a lot of questions. Like I told my manager in my recent one-on-one that like I don't know what I don't know. So when something like seems a bit off, like I just ask a lot of questions because it kind of demonstrates that like you're willing to learn and you're curious about the impact of the decisions that you make, and you're not just like accepting things for what they are. And of course, there's like things that you can do ahead of time, like research or like kind of like digging through stuff on your own. But like asking questions, I think, is like the number one way to kind of like learn more and make yourself feel more comfortable with what you're doing.
Yeah, in response to the question, if I experience imposter syndrome, I would say that a lot. Like I feel like I experience this a lot in my work. And like even though all the people in my department are so nice, like I love all of them, I still have this like I have still experienced this feeling of like being an other. Like when a couple of the male professors in the department would be standing in like a small circle and discussing something, and then I would try to be like part of it, but they're also tall. I'd have to like crane my neck to like take a look at their faces. So I just have these fleeting thoughts like, do I belong here? Like I feel a little different. But how do I handle it? I'm still working on it. I have a tendency to always second guess myself, like in everything, and I'm always like trying not to step on anyone's shoes. I don't like to like ask for things, but just recently I've been trying to silence that inner voice that kind of warns me, like, don't ask for it, they're gonna get mad, and try to be more bold. And also I've been trying to always keep up to date with like the knowledge in my field, and because a big part of imposter syndrome, I think, is feeling like my knowledge is inadequate. So then the best way to combat that, I figured, would be to keep building my knowledge. So I can't say that about myself anymore. So those are my two things.
So for me, the imposter syndrome that I've experienced for a couple of years is like thinking that people just respect me for what I am academically or career-wise, and just for my grades or my capabilities. But the way I've been, trying to conquer that is making friends who don't look at me that way. I generally don't become friends with someone who's like, oh, you're so smart, you're so that. Like, it just doesn't feel natural to me. I like having people who keep me grounded, who will, treat me the same way as they treat all of their friends, no matter what the capabilities are. Because at the end of the day, I don't think academic achievements should be something that should be looked at when you're making friends. And because I have that, because I know that there are people who don't just, respect me or hang out with me because of my capabilities, I think that imposter syndrome is kind of reducing for me, because I know that these people will stay with me even if I'm not the same person anymore.
Yeah, those are all great points. Thank you for sharing your experiences. And if anyone who's listening to this is going through imposter syndrome, I hope that hearing these stories will help you with your own journey as well. And I'm sure that many of the people listening to this are other genders other than females. So if what is something that they can do to make women feel more comfortable in this industry?
Well, I think that in my case, having like the fourth years are a testament of that, like of what you're saying, in the sense that at least the mentors I had were really open to help me. And it wasn't about whether I was a girl or a guy. I always saw them helping other people. And not just that, I always felt like if you don't understand something, it's because, okay, let's look at where you don't get it, or let's look at what's the problem. It wasn't about who I was, where I came from. That never even came in the conversation. So I think it's having those things that if you see another girl and you're a guy, help her out, just because if you feel like you want to help her out and it feels right to you, there doesn't need to be anything else involved, right? In the same way that you would maybe want to help your other bros, you can help your sis, right? That's what I would say.
I think for me, like the most like jarring thing I've noticed in the industry is like people like trying to protect my feelings, and like shielding me from like criticism or like stuff like that. And I'm a pretty efficient person, so I just want to know what it is. But I think part of that also is just working on your own ability to like own that accountability and like take the feedback and the criticism, because if you are unable to do that, then people are going to react to it and to keep trying to like shield you from the harsh realities or whatever.
I guess one thing I would suggest is always try to like challenge your own biases, because sometimes these biases are unconscious. Like the person that you mentioned, like the little, I think it was a kid who's called the robotics club like for boys, right? So like realizing that and being aware of it, I think is a big step. Like not falling into the trap of thinking women are less capable of a skill just because years of marketing and the Western world have taught us this, right? And I think one other thing would be just try to follow the lead of other people who you feel like are doing the right thing. Like for me personally, I would say like all the professors that I've had, like Arnold, Andrew, and Dan, like I'm infinitely grateful for all their support, because I wouldn't be here without people like them. So follow the lead of people who you feel like are doing the right thing and try to mimic that. Don't write memos to your colleagues about how women are less capable than you because you're a man.
So I totally agree with that. So the one thing that you mentioned was, people shielding you too much or people being too gentle. I don't want to be treated like I'm really gentle and my feelings will be hurt quickly. And on the other side, you have people who are totally talking about boy talks in front of you and, talking about their girlfriends and whatnot. So I think it would also be nice to be a little mindful of the fact that, we're not that comfortable with that area yet, and we can't relate to some of that yet. So, kind of have some midpoint where you don't treat someone super gently, but at the same time, you're mindful of what you say in front of them.
And I think that really just does come down to the person, like getting to know us as people and what we're comfortable with, and not just assuming that we are or aren't comfortable with something just because we're female.
Right.
I think it's really important to really listen without putting other stuff in front. What I mean by that is sometimes as girls we have good stuff to say, and sometimes because we're thought of as capable, maybe that isn't necessarily listened to. So I think it's really just regardless of who it is, maybe they might have some good feedback for you, but you don't see it, then you don't see it, right?
Absolutely. As someone in the chat box just said, well said. And I completely agree. Those are some important messages. And I especially like the one about, not being too delicate about someone's feelings, just treating someone the same way that you would treat others, but also not mentioning too much boy talk around women because it can make them feel uncomfortable, which is kind of just tied to the basic concept of respect, of course. Okay, so moving into part 2 of our podcast episode today, which is organization skills. This is quite a different topic, but I think everyone here is pretty organized, so we can give some good tips on this as well. What's one thing you use to stay organized?
Lately, I got myself an iPad, and it's been really cool. I got myself a note-taking app. I heard I'm using GoodNotes, but for example, Nas uses Notability, so it depends on the person. And it's been really cool because before I would type some of my computer science notes, and then I wanted to change them up, and that was okay. I also use Notion, recommended as well. But one thing is that first, when I started in first year, I would write a lot, and so when I would go into lecture, I kind of was wasting, because I had written it and I wanted to add more stuff in, I couldn't really do that. So I think that's one of the things, really kind of knowing how to take notes and not really focus completely on that, but rather doing more problems and doing more coding than just notes. That's one of the things that I wish I would have known more.
For me, I'm a very big list person. I make lists for everything. Sometimes I'll leave lists for my boyfriend. He'll find it a little passive aggressive, but that is my thing. I think one of those helpful lists that I make is a list of priorities. So I always have an ongoing list of what is the most important thing. And then when I'm trying to decide what to do next, or what I should be doing throughout the day, I always make sure that it aligns with one of the priorities on the list. And if it doesn't, I ask myself, why am I doing this? Is there a point to me actually doing this at all? And that kind of helps eliminate those tasks that you feel like you should be doing, but maybe aren't relevant at all.
I love lists as well. Like I have so many lists on like every single, like I have lists on my computer with post-it notes. I have lists on my phone with like apps and stuff. But what I found was that as I'm prepping for like courses and I'm doing my own research and stuff on the side, I had so much going on that I would just waste so much time every day figuring out, okay, which one should I do? Because they're all pretty important. So what I ended up doing was I made like a calendar of like the rest of the month. And with like sticky notes, I would say, okay, this day is for 207 lecture, whatever. This day is for blah, 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 blah. And I'll just set aside a day for each thing. And by putting it out on like the whole month rather than a day, I could like map out whether or not I have enough time to reasonably complete all this by the end of summer. So I felt like that really helped. There's also this thing called fixed schedule productivity, which I've tried before. It's hard if you don't have good self-discipline. I'm still working on it, but just it's similar kind of idea. Whereas I set out the whole day for one thing or two things, this one would involve setting out specific time slots. So from 9 to 10, I'm going to work on this. And from 10 to 11, I'm going to work on this. And just having that, I feel like really gets rid of that extra overhead of trying to figure out, wait, but which one do I work on? I'm so overwhelmed because you just like, okay, look at your list, do that, and get it done.
Yeah, so for me too, I use a list and a calendar. So I sit here all day. So I have this whiteboard here with like a corkboard section where I pin stuff. So I keep pinning like my to-do list for the day. And then the calendar has, what I need to do for the month. And I feel like having that in front of me all day really helps because I'm just seeing that all the time and not forgetting. And definitely, like Sadia said, having the time slots has been really useful for me. Or else I just end up spending too much time doing one task. There's like 10 bugs that come up, and then I push the other task. So having these dedicated time slots helps me because I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop this task now, move to the next one. Then I'll come back to it later.
Yeah, when it comes to lists, I heard this tip from Superwoman actually, which is to have two lists, and once you finish something on the list, you should move it to the completed list, and that way you can see how much you completed, and that makes you more likely to work on things on the uncompleted list or incomplete list. Those are good tips. Thank you for sharing. Our next question is, how do you focus in a distracting environment? I think this is extremely relevant now because of COVID. We're all working from home, and like, especially Sadia, how do you focus when your adorable animals are out?
What I like to do is I plug in to listen to some like study music, different like relax music, but also not to a point that it's gonna drive me to sleep, right? Because if I'm sleeping on homework, that's a problem. I also try to make sure that I try to organize my room because something that I've noticed is that when my desk is messy and when my room is messy, I don't get that much work done. Like my room just feels heavier, right? But when everything's like organized, I also try to grab some snacks every so often, and just having that, I think that maybe keeps me more away from other people. Also, I think it's important to like set boundaries with people when it comes to not just obviously it's a little bit harder maybe when families coming in and out and whatever, but let's say if you have like friends and you want to like talk to them, but you also have that project that's really important to you, it's important to like voice those things and understand that it's okay to say no. It's okay to put yourself first.
For me, most of my distractions come from myself. Like, it's just the thoughts that I'm having, like things that I'm thinking about. So a strategy that I use is called brain dumping. So when I'm feeling like really overwhelmed with thoughts, I will just dump all of my thoughts onto a piece of paper or into a notepad. That way I kind of just clear my head and I can get back to those ideas later. So like just ignoring them, like I might forget something, I might just overlook it later. But now that I know that it's written down, I'm not worried about that anymore. I don't have to think about it anymore. And there's actually like a bunch of different ways that you can brain dump depending on like your learning style. So like you can write things down, you can use color coding, you can talk into a tape recorder, you can walk around, you can talk to someone. Like there is a way for like every single person to do this kind of like brain dumping technique. And then the second thing that I do is actually take breaks. Sometimes when you're feeling really distracted, it's probably because you could use a distraction. And this is something that obviously takes a bit of self-discipline as well. But by taking like planned, purposeful breaks, then you're not going to overwhelm yourself, and you're going to be able to focus more on what you need to do.
For me, that's definitely a big problem. I really like the brain dump idea that you mentioned, Florence, because I feel like that's something I really needed, especially when I was a student. I feel like I had so many thoughts all the time. But yeah, right now I have 5 animals in the house. I have a bird, I have 3 cats, and I have a dog. And a lot of them are super clingy. Like my bird, one of the cats, and my dog. They're always like, give me attention. So I definitely have a distracting environment, but I'm not complaining about it too much because I love them so much that even when even before COVID, I would often work at home. So I feel like I've really had to work on that skill of working in an environment with all these people and animals wanting my attention all the time. And there are 2 tools that I think really help me. One is this website or an app called Toggle, Toggl, and it's just a timer. It's nothing that complex, but it keeps track of, so you just put I started a task, I put down the name of the task, I play, and pause when I'm done or stop when I'm done. And it just times me. And I feel like having that timer running helps me stay on track because that helps me map out my schedule as well. So I'm like, okay, how long does it take me to do this task? And then I time myself so that I know how long similar tasks in the future will take, making better schedules. And if I know that the timer is running, I'm less likely to be like, okay, let me just go ahead and pet my dog for a few minutes, because it's like, okay, no, wait, I'm being timed. So that really helped. I also have this app that I use on especially distracting days called Forest. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it literally has like little digital trees that grow like the longer that you stay focused, and it's on your phone. So if you switch to a different app, the tree dies. So it's like you can set a timer for like 25 minutes and the tree will keep growing. But if I'm like, oh, let me just check my Instagram, then the tree will die. So it kind of feels like, oh no, wait, I have to keep my tree going. So that's a cute little app that helps me. So using tools like that.
It's funny because actually a couple days ago, I learned that there's an extension that you can use on your computer and like link it to your Forest account. So it also really helps as well. Yeah.
I really like those ideas with the brain dumping thing, because sometimes I just feel like there's too many thoughts on my head, and that one too where like I'll just check Instagram for a bit. And what I tend to do, but I like this idea now too. What I do when I have too many thoughts is I do yoga. Stretching really helps me because that makes me think of one thing at a time. When I'm working, I also listen to music. I think it just keeps the pace going. And the other thing that happened during COVID-19 is that you kind of look more for social life because you're not working around people. So you're missing that aspect and you just feel like you're alone. So being on Discord servers helps me with that. So I take breaks, and whenever I do take breaks, I talk to people on there. So I think that keeps me focused for a longer time because I'm happier when I get back to work.
I'm gonna start using that.
I just wanted to thank. I wanted to thank Laura for mentioning the Forest account extension thing. I actually didn't know about that, so I'm gonna take a look at that.
Yeah, I think it'd be good, cool. And like, let me know. We can make forests together or trees. I'm down.
So we're reaching the end of the hour, and it's been a really fun conversation. However, now it's up to you folks to come up with a question for next week's guests to answer. Naz, are we revealing who's coming next episode?
Yes, we are, because it's confirmed.
Okay, would you like to announce it?
I think you can do it.
Okay, so next episode we have the topic of grad school, and we invited Mike Polyuk, the professor, to join that topic as well, and we have some grad students. So that's going to be exciting. So can you folks come up with a question to ask them? Does it carry over?
This is so cool because Mike was just my prof for proofs. Oh my gosh. It makes me very happy to be part of this.
I have a question, being a recent student graduate. I would ask, what's the best way that you kept the balance between your grad school life and like your actual social life and family life? Because I feel like that's something a lot of grad students struggle with.
I also want to point out it's really interesting how like each week we announce that we're gonna have a prof next week. So first we had Michael, right? And he asked Ilir a question. He asked him what his worst course was. And then we ended up asking Ilir that. And then this week Ilir had a question for you. He wanted to ask you what you hated about 207. So then next week for Mike we have a question from you. I just love how it's getting carried over.
We have a question from the chat from Nicer Cold. Question to Florence. Do you think that we're limiting ourselves with just taking CS in uni?
I don't think it's necessarily limiting, but I think it could definitely be, there could be more opportunities if you're comparing it with other things. Like with just the CS degree, you have so much different knowledge that you can apply, but sometimes it would be difficult to figure out how to apply that without that other knowledge, right? But like a lot of like positions like product owners, project managers, like sometimes they're looking for people with a CS background. So yeah, so I guess not limiting, but more opportunities if you compare it with another thing.
Yeah, the CS specialist has, I think, 12.0 credits, which means you still have 8 credits to take courses in other subject areas.
And like I'm like totally biased, but I would highly recommend that any CS major take WRI 203 because it is a very good opportunity for you to just like learn basic writing and communication. And I think that is a skill that isn't touched on as much in the CS major, but is a very helpful skill that you can apply to whatever job that you end up getting.
Yep, we have a question for Sadia, I think, from Miss Hermit. How do you approach profs for recommendation? Though it may be too late if I already graduated, crying face. I should have went to office hours, crying face.
So for recommendation letters, like for grad, I'm assuming it's like for grad school and or work. What I would suggest is it's really awkward to me as a prof when I have students emailing me who took my class like a couple of years ago, and then they tell me about how much they liked me, and then ask me to write a recommendation letter for them, and I don't even know their name. So I think the one thing to remember about asking someone for a recommendation letter, it's not about you liking the prof, it's about the prof liking you, because you're not writing the recommendation letter, they are. So definitely get to know your profs. It can't just be a one-sided relationship, because then your prof doesn't really have much to write about other than maybe you got a good grade in the course. So go to office hours, like the comment already mentioned. Definitely go to office hours. Like a lot of the profs in our CS department are super, super nice, super friendly, even if they may seem scary when they're talking to like a large classroom, because we have like prepared kind of topics to go through. Once you actually get to know them, a lot of them are like funny, a lot of them are kind. So just talk to them. It doesn't hurt. That way they have a face to attach to the name, or like a personality to attach to your name when you actually ask them for a recommendation letter, because you liking them doesn't help your letter.
We have a fun question, which is from the Raghav Sharma. Big question. If you had to pick one, dogs or cats, which would it be? Everyone can answer this one.
Okay, Laura, I'll let you go first.
Oh, sure. So I actually have two dogs at home. I have one that's half German Shepherd, half Husky, and a Golden Retriever. So I really like dogs. I've never had cats though, so for now I prefer dogs.
I'm a cat person.
Yeah.
That's it. Period.
Yeah, I think everyone knows that about Florence.
I was just gonna say if you know, you know, but
I like how, because in general cats are very chill, and like the answer you gave, I like it was also very simple, very very cat, you know.
You're like a cat.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's one of her arguments of how she's actually a cat, like 50% cat.
Thank you.
For me, when you asked that question, like my heart skipped a beat. I was like, I cannot choose. Like that's like I love all animals, but I have a cat and a dog. Like I have 3 cats and a dog. I would not be able to choose between them. And I feel like cats have such a bad rep, because they're often like depicted as like, oh, they're so standoffish and they don't love you. But one of my cats is so cuddly. Like he literally hugs me. Like when I go downstairs in the morning, he'll come up to me and start meowing and like going, like rubbing himself against my leg, and then I pick him up, and then he literally rests his head on my shoulder and starts like rubbing his head on my chin. Like he's actually hugging me, and he puts his arm around my neck while doing that. Oh, like I can't. And meanwhile, my dog is like going crazy, like, oh my god, you're finally up, I missed you so much, you know how long it's been since I've seen you. So yeah, like they're both so loving, like they're too cute. I cannot choose.
Follow Bumbly on Instagram, guys.
Oh yeah,
Bumbly the Cloud.
my
Favorite
dog has
account.
an Instagram. I mean, my cats are there too. My cats, Bird, all of them make appearances on that account.
Yeah, so for me, I'm actually scared of most animals, but I see pictures and I see videos. I honestly really like both cats and dogs. I think I like them both for different things. Like, they can both be a completely different mood. Like, cats like usually look all calm and just minding their own thing, and dogs running around. So I think both of those things can be cute depending on what you like. And hearing all these talks actually makes me want to get rid of my phobia and actually interact more with both the animals.
You should do that, Naz. I'll help you. Once COVID is over, just come over. I can give you exposure therapy with all these animals.
Definitely, I would love
One
to.
time Sadia brought her dog to class. It was amazing.
Oh yeah, I said that I thought that we have a guest lecturer coming for joining us for the last lecture, and then I was like, okay, he's here, and then my dog just came in. He was so friendly. Yeah, I have a
It's
little
iconic.
clip of that. Nivi, have you seen I have posted a little video of it. Like, there's a little clip of that. Like, I think you're in it.
Yeah,
It's
I
on Bumbly
saw
the
it.
Cloud.
I was so happy. Memories of that day. We have another question, which is, what does Sadia think of the upcoming semester since it's online?
I mean, I guess all of you can answer that. I'm curious to hear what you guys think of it from a student perspective, as well as I'm like prepping for my courses. But I just wanted to say that all of the professors were putting in a lot of effort into like completely revamping our courses to give you guys the best experience. So hopefully it all works out. It's not going to be as messy as like the last 2 weeks of when we had to switch completely to online, like so suddenly were, because we're putting a lot of thought into it. We have like meetings about it, a discussion board about it called like CS 911, because it's like emergency tips for switching. So hopefully you will enjoy it. We're trying our best. And I think one main thing to remember is, as you're doing online learning from a student perspective, because I've taken a lot of online courses myself, and one of the big things is that because you don't have that weekly face-to-face meeting, it can be really hard to keep on track of your stuff, because you can be like, oh, readings, whatever, I'll do it later, and there's nobody kind of reminding you like, by the way, this is due. So definitely try to still make connections with your peers. Try to, like, we're going to have online synchronous lectures. It can be easy to say, well, they're going to post it online anyway, so I won't go, but do try to go, because just that instantaneous kind of response, being able to chat in the chat box on like your Zoom or whatever lecture, can be really, really helpful in keeping you on track, so everything doesn't pile up at the end, because that's really dangerous. It happens so often in online courses.
From a student's perspective, I did a course this summer which was completely online, and on the day of the exam, I realized something, that I didn't know a single other person in the course throughout the entire course, because all I did was just watch the lectures and then do the assignments, but I had no interaction with anyone else in the course. So try to meet at least one other person in the course.
Yeah, I think one of the things too is I really like connecting with profs online. Why I'm saying this is because, for example, like I tried it as well in person, but I felt that especially when it was near exam time, everyone was always in the room, so you never really got to like ask your prof like, hey, what's up, like, who are you, tell me more about yourself. But in this case, for example, like I remember my prof, Mike, actually, he had office hours early in the morning, and a lot of people don't go early in the morning because it's hard to wake up. Like I even had it, like sometimes I would like hop in class like 2 minutes before, like I had just woken up like 2 minutes early, okay. Like but like, for example, one of the things is I went to his office hours and he taught me about like hexaflexagons, which by the way, people should check that out. It's kind of cool. He taught me about like geometry. We had talks about like LEDs and like cool robotic stuff, and I was like, wow, my math prof also likes robotics. And he like showed me that like one of the problems, he was actually thinking of like this robotics like car, and like I was a couple weeks earlier, I was like doing some like mechatronics lectures because I wanted to like try a mechatronics course outside, and like just it's like, wow, I can relate math to robotics. So having that talk with the prof like helped me feel that, like helped me see that cruise was cooler in a sense. So yeah, recommend it.
And profs really like it too. Like, it's boring to just lecture to a room full of silent people or invisible people because nobody comes to online lectures. So try to come, talk to your profs, make it feel like you're people. Like, we want to get to know you too. We don't want you to just be student numbers.
That means so much. Wow. Thank you.
We have another question from Lucas, and this is a meta question, which is, what topic do you want to see on this podcast next time? Anyone have ideas?
Oh, wow.
I'll give a bit of a spoiler. We have a math topic podcast episode in the works soon.
Oh, actually, it'd be kind of cool to get a bunch of like math profs and then maybe ask them about paradoxes and see where they go with it. I don't know. I just it'd be kind of funny.
Like the philosophical side.
Yeah.
You know, I think we should also have a pets episode and just
Let me know. I'll bring my dogs. You guys let me know.
It would be really nice to like.
What would the dogs talk about?
Behaviors.
I want to see your dogs, Laura. Are they around you right now?
They're not right now. They're not here right now. But like, I'm like, we'll figure it out. We can make this work. I'll show them to you for sure.
We have a question from Prior Approval, which is, hi, Sadia. What class are you the most excited to teach this year?
Okay, well, I'm teaching out of the courses that I'm teaching. So I'm teaching 207, 490, 309, 108. Those are all the ones that I'm teaching. Out of those, I think, okay, 207 I am excited about because I've been, like I said, working a lot on it and trying to figure out the best way to teach it online. I've taught that course already like 2 or 3 times before, but this time is completely different because of the online environment. So I hope that goes well. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. But I'm also interested or excited about 309 because that'll be my first time teaching web development, and that's a topic I've always been interested in. That's literally what got me into computer science. Like, as a kid, I would design web pages for my friends and stuff. So that would be interesting as well.
I'm taking 309 this semester, or winter semester. So I'm excited for that.
Taking 207, so let's see.
I hope you guys like it.
Laura, have you heard of CSC 375? I think that would be a course you're interested in. It's the mechatronics course.
Robotics, right? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, robotics.
So I'm actually part of the robotics club, and we'll see. I've definitely, like, I remember last year, like listening to the upper years in robotics, and I was just like so wowed by everything they did. Like, I remember they were like working with a car and and that had computer vision and that was moving around, and like, or whenever I would like pass by the room and saw like Franca, which is like the big arm. Oh my gosh, I geeked out so much. Like, so it makes me really excited to. Yeah, I definitely want to take those courses. I didn't know the code, but yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, someone also had a good suggestion for an episode idea talking about the admin side of university with either Dan or Andrew. And I think that's a really good idea too, because there's actually so much to the admin side of the university that we as students don't get to see. Because, you know, when I go to these reading groups, we talk about some things and I'm like, oh, why can't we have this in labs? And then I found out that the space you have for a lab is also controlled by the university. Like, that's exactly how much space you can have between 2 desks in a lab and stuff. So it's really, you know, surprising how much stuff is actually controlled by the university.
That's really interesting, actually. I think that would be a great topic. And building off of that, it could also just be like kind of a behind the scenes podcast if you also want to discuss like the life of a professor, because I feel that a lot of like students that I talk to misunderstand how much work professors actually put into a course. Like, I had students who talked about, like, who would ask me like, it might be so easy being a prof. It's like the dream job, right? You only work like 2 hours a week for a lecture. Like, that's so amazing. I've literally had students tell me that, and it's like, like not exactly 2 hours a week, more like 24 hours a day, but so that'd be interesting to have like students see what actually goes into it, especially for students who are interesting maybe in following that path.
Cool. I'll record that as a podcast idea. And for future episodes, we'll see. So that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you everyone for joining us. It was really fun having you all here in this discussion. I think we touched on some good topics and we got some good tips for the listeners. Do you have anything last words to say?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for joining
I really
us.
enjoyed.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You guys are so awesome. It was nice having this conversation. And yeah, for anyone listening, I hope you're having a nice day.
Laura, you have to come to my office hours when you're in 207 and show me your dogs.
I will annoy you at office hours. You just wait.
Okay, and thank you everyone for tuning into this episode.
Thank you.
See you next
Bye.
week.
You.
Want to be in an exclusively girls community, like Orange mentioned, we have White Van girls. So, you can DM me and I'll add you.
Yes, please. It's a really cool chat. We talk a lot and it's awesome. We don't feel like a minority there. It's so good.
Mhm.
Okay, bye.